People who don't accept your boundaries, they don't have a problem with you. They have a problem with control. Because something really interesting happens when you finally start enforcing boundaries. People who benefited from your lack of them suddenly become uncomfortable, and it's all about them, and they're clutching their pearls, and their heart hurts, and oh my God, I'm so stressed, and they're so full of shit. Boundaries are easy to support until they inconvenience someone else. So welcome back to Sip on This, the show where we talk about love, life, careers, and boundaries. If this is your first time joining me, welcome. I'm your host, Deirdre Haggerty, an ICF certified coach and founder of Coaching with Miss D, which offers life, career, and relationship coaching to help you align your values and vision of life. I am so excited you're joining me today to have a conversation, coffee in hand, as we chat about life, careers, relationships, and all the things that shape who we are. I won't lecture you or tell you what to do. It's just the two of us in a coffee shop chatting about topics that make us laugh, drive us nuts, like boundaries. So, boundary creep happens slowly. I love that word, boundary creep, because you could imagine it, right? Have you ever paid attention to it before it was too late? When somebody starts trying to get through your boundaries that you've put up and have ignored, but additional things start happening. Like, you may start with, extra requests. Like, hey, can you stop and get stamps on the way to the office? And at your first reaction is usually your best reaction, and your gut is like, no, I can't do that. And then you're like, but it is on my way. Maybe. Oh, but if I do it, you know what? I got to rearrange my morning. And oh my God. And then you start thinking all these things of why you should do it, when the fact of the matter is you shouldn't do it, because this person can do it themselves and they can get reimbursed by the company. There's no reason for you to go out of your way to do something that somebody else can easily do on their own. And you know what else? You don't have to explain that to anybody. There's blurred lines, such as that same request. Maybe it comes through on a text sent on Mother's Day with a Happy Mother's Day lead-in, okay? Or this is my favorite. Just one quick thing, which is really just one more quick thing. And then there's the after-hours expectations. Oof, this happened at 3 jobs for me. You want to know how long I lasted at those jobs? Or like when part-time work is actually full-time work at part-time pay. So maybe the text messages start coming in with requests to organize on the weekend, and these messages are happening where payroll is not even up and running yet. Your official day of work isn't maybe for another month away. And I'm not talking about when you have to do the actual paperwork, all of the onboarding stuff. I'm talking about doing actual physical labor for this job, and you're not going to get paid for it, but they're requesting that you are. Or when it's, say, a Sunday night and you're getting messages from an owner of a company that you're working for, and in no uncertain terms, they are telling you, you have to answer them back. And you're laying in bed on a Sunday night, just kind of getting yourself ready for the weekend. Like, is this man out of his mind? Or then there's the incessant texts on off days for questions that are not life-threatening. But like, how do you do this? Or where do you find that? I don't know. If you've been at the company longer than me, you should know that. Just because I'm the manager, don't ask me those questions. Have some agency here. Figure it out. Now, as a manager, which I've been for some time, after hours texts are par for the course. We expect those. Why? Because people call out, and you have to fill that space. Okay? That should definitely be all that happens after hours, unless, of course, there's a medical emergency, fire, something. And then people start to normalize this personal access, and no, it's not. And start to cross those lines of, well, you're a really nice person and you should really do this for me. No. And this emotional labor then becomes expected. What starts as helping quietly becomes an obligation. So why do people fear boundaries at work? I just had this conversation with somebody very close to me. There's a fear of retaliation, which is against HR policy, especially if you work for a corporation. I'm going to kind of go into more detail with that. There's the fear of losing further opportunities, fear of being labeled difficult, people-pleasing tendencies. And as a career coach, I help people with this all the time, especially women in their second act. And for you, if you're not familiar with coaching with Miss D, when I say second act, it's not necessarily midlife. It could be any time in your life where you're just trying to rethink what it is you want out of your career. And then especially for women, being conditioned to over-accommodate. Many professionals are not exhausted from the work itself. They're exhausted from the unmanaged access. So back to this conversation I just had. And the person I was speaking to is like, yeah, but if you set up that boundary, it might piss off your boss, it might upset your manager. And in my experience, I've worked for various organizations over the years, and some have been big corporations, and some have been more on the franchise avenue, and even some just like a single owner, which with many different locations. Okay. And in my experience, now this cannot be validated. There is no researched analytics by this. This is literally just my own experience. And maybe you can relate to this. But 50% of the companies that I've worked for care about your boundaries. It's those smaller businesses I was discussing. They do not. Because, and I can understand this as a solopreneur, as somebody who's also owned a business with my husband, I can totally understand if you're putting in all that time, then the expectation is everybody needs to. When I owned my business with my husband, that was not the expectation. Because just because I'm doing it doesn't mean the people I pay to do their job should do that. Not everybody is like that. So what if I told you the emotional reaction to boundaries is not your problem? It's theirs. It is not your problem. It is their problem. And this is why so many people fear holding fast to their boundaries, because they fear there will be disappointment from others, passive aggressively, in emails that are just flying out with these worded text messages or email messages that are like, where did this come from? They'll withdraw from you totally. They'll throw guilt tactics. It's all about them. But here's the thing. These people, they don't want to do their job. They're the ones who are looking for other people to do their job. Their energy has shifted, and they're taking your boundaries personally. They have a problem with control, and you have not permitted yourself to be controlled. Healthy people may not always like boundaries, but they will respect them. And some relationships only function when one person overextends themselves. And this works in both our professional and personal lives. As a young mom, it was really important for me to exercise. I had always worked out. I worked out while I was pregnant. I worked out before I had children. It was very important for me. It was important for my mental state to just release some stress, to get out that energy, to have that private time for myself. It wasn't always about looking good, and it was also about feeling good. Running after my kids all day long, working, doing all of those things. And at first, my husband, and he could attest to this, I told him, this is my time. I need you to watch our children during this time. At first, he didn't like it. We had clashed over it a little bit. I also then kind of adjusted my schedule for it. Like maybe I got up a little earlier, and then that became very routine for me, especially when I went to work outside of the house, getting up early to work out in the morning while he was still home to take care of whatever the kids needed so that I could do that. It was a compromise, but that was my boundary. That was something that I was not willing to give up. It was important to me. A coach, such as myself, can help you with boundaries and can also help you stop people pleasing. With life, with business, with careers. What if I told you boundaries are not about explanations? And I mentioned this before. There's no over-explaining for no. You should never have to soften no. No is powerful. It's singular. No. Period. 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 You don't need permission to refuse a task, especially if your gut instinct is like, no, I'm not doing that. Nor do you need to justify every decision, like I talked about earlier, because a boundary is not an opening statement for a negotiation. It's a line that you won't cross, That's the difference there, right? You're not crossing that line to help somebody else out. People often think that, I'm going to tell them about my boundaries and they can't cross it. That's not the way that works. You're putting up that line and you are not crossing that line. Why are you not crossing that line? You are not crossing that line because it protects your peace. If a colleague, coworker, friend, personal or professional, they don't like your boundary, it says more about them than you. If they walk away, I'm sorry. They were not meant to be in your life. As Mel says, let them. And let you figure out what you're going to do next. And then what if I told you this topic comes up so often in career and life coaching, and it is so easy to reconcile? It may not seem it at first, but it is. And here's how. Because one of the biggest things I see professionally, especially with people in midlife, leadership positions, caregiving personalities, or high achievers, exhaustion doesn't just come from workload. It comes from over-accessibility, where you feel like you're being pulled into every direction. It comes from constantly managing everyone else's expectations, their needs, their emotions, their timelines, their emergencies, their priorities, while slowly abandoning your own. And somewhere along that line, many professionals start believing that being valuable means always being available. That saying no is risky, that boundaries will cost you opportunities. That advocating for themselves makes them difficult. No, it's not. Who else is going to advocate for you? That if they stop overextending, people will stop liking them, including professionally. And honestly, sometimes people do become uncomfortable when you stop over-functioning for them. Good. They should learn how to do things on their own and stop making excuses why they can't do their job and start pawning it off on everybody else. If you're in a volunteer situation and you volunteered to be in that situation and you don't want the tasks associated with it, you can't just pawn it off on somebody else who's in an equal volunteer environment. Leave that volunteer position. Same as work. Same with colleagues. Oh, there's a new person here. Let me shove them the work. No. They're going to become uncomfortable. Too bad. It doesn't mean the boundary is wrong. It means the dynamic has changed. People don't like change, but sometimes a change needs to happen for your own peace. And this is especially common in toxic or emotionally unhealthy workplace environments, where the expectation becomes you must be available, you must be flexible, you must be accommodating. Don't make things harder, just handle it. Oh my goodness, I literally just heard it last week from another one of my clients who was dealing with the same thing, and that person's boss got physically angry, said to my client, just handle it, very loudly, very abruptly. Other people heard it, got very angry, clenched their fists because that person was holding fast to their boundaries. They were already doing extra things, and the boss wanted them to do more and was complaining that they weren't doing more. It was a high stress occasion that was happening, and it led into something not such a good situation. They dealt with it and brought it to HR. Unfortunately, that's going to happen, but some people are afraid to do that because they would just rather protect what they think is that peace. But what's actually happening is their peace is being invaded by that situation. So now, hopefully, after going to HR, that won't happen anymore. Over time, people lose touch with where the job ends and where they begin. And that's where coaching can help. Because coaching isn't just about career pivots or resumes or LinkedIn profiles. That is definitely a factor, but that is not the only factor. A huge part of coaching, and I'm going to say the majority of coaching, is about communication, self-advocacy. Like I said before, nobody's advocating for you but yourself. Confidence, little steps at a time, and then learning how to navigate difficult dynamics professionally without abandoning yourself in the process. Sometimes clients come to coaching saying they want a new career. Okay. Sometimes they just really need is permission to stop living in survival mode, to stop apologizing for having needs, to stop over-explaining every boundary, to stop carrying responsibilities that were never theirs to begin with. And for many people in midlife or career transitions, this becomes a redefining moment because they start asking, who am I now? What do I actually want? What kind of life do I want this next chapter to look like? This is a big one. What am I no longer willing to tolerate just to keep the peace? Like the person before would have maybe kept the peace of the boss yelling at them until the boss clenched their fists in anger. Why should anybody have to tolerate that? You shouldn't. That's powerful work. And it's uncomfortable work because boundaries will often disappoint the version of people who benefited from your lack of them, or the person who has no respect for boundaries and is just trying to have others do the work for them. But protecting your peace, your energy, your time, your identity, that is not selfish, that is necessary. So, sip on that. Please share with somebody who might need a coach today. Please share with somebody who might. I have outlined so many of what my clients have told me and what they deal with. If you know somebody who is experiencing that or have experienced that, maybe they need a coach. Maybe they need to just speak to somebody to work through it. And I would love it if you would like, subscribe, and visit Coaching with Miss D for more resources. Until next time, keep sipping. Hold fast to your boundaries. And remember to live your life as your authentic self, your version, no one else's.